Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we bring in Attorney General Scott Pruitt today.
Yes, we want to talk today on this show to the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the state of Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt, whom you've met a number of times before. This will be Scott's 6th appearance on The Verdict, and his office activity never slows down. It may change a little bit from time to time, but he's always very busy and got a lot of interesting things going on that he can tell us about.
Well, they are proactively doing things, and we're
Yes.
going to find out what's on his
Indeed.
plate right now. Scott Pruitt, today's guest on The Verdict.
One of the reasons why I moved to Rockaway is because it's such a diverse culture and different ethnicities. And my camera has opened some doors to really meet people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to meet without it. I'm Beth Perkins, I'm a professional photographer, and I'm Chickasaw. It came in as like a mini tidal wave. Everything sustainable had just disappeared in one swoop, and I just underestimated this power, and I realized really how little we are in this whole scheme of things and how quickly things can go bad. My community is still rebuilding, and for them to just show up out of the blue and just start clearing out my house was, I'm not one that likes to ask for help. So for someone to come and do that for me it was really touching and humbling. I've thought about the history of the Chickasaws and what they went through as far as relocating and losing their homes and having to rebuild and to thrive in the end after all of that is just a true testament to the Chickasaw strength. And I try and draw from that and remember that that's a part of who I am.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
As we indicated in the opening segment, we're really honored to have the Honorable Scott Pruitt join us today for his 6th appearance on The Verdict. Scott was first elected Attorney General in 2010, then re-elected in 2014. Prior to that, he served with distinction for 8 years in the Oklahoma State Senate. A little bit of personal background on him. He went to the University of Kentucky and was a college baseball player, a second baseman, I believe, at the University of Kentucky. In the law practice, he was engaged in private practice in the Tulsa area for a number of years, and in that time he established himself as a real expert in constitutional law. He doesn't call himself that, but the profession did, recognized his expertise in constitutional law. Since becoming our Attorney General, he's got a number of firsts, one of which is his office established the first federalism unit to work in the AG's office to deal with issues that hadn't previously been addressed. And we're really pleased to have you back. Thanks for coming again.
It's good to be with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on the show.
Good to see
I
you.
would ask what's new, but gosh, it seems like every week you guys are working on a new project. So I don't know where this answer's going, but tell me what are you guys working on now?
Well, a lot of it is what Kent mentioned earlier. I mean, we have so much litigation that ensues that is not anticipated. I mean, we had issues, and we have issues, whether it's federal or state issues, that, I mean, we almost have 1,000 cases on our docket.
Oh my goodness.
In the office, just in the litigation area. So that's not even including the federalism unit that you're talking about, Kent. And that unit has actually prosecuted many of these cases. The Waters of the United States case that we have, that we just recently got an injunction on, the Clean Power Plan challenge that we're now a part of with a number of states. We're seeking injunctive relief there against the Climate Action Plan of the administration. There's a lot of discussion going on in the U.S. Senate about that in Congress. So there are a lot of issues, particularly around the EPA and the environmental issues affecting ranching, farming, oil and gas in the state of Oklahoma, and those have been predominant of late. But it is seasonal, and I do think that this administration is trying to rush through quite a few number of regulations, ozone, Clean Power Plan, others, that they're trying to impose upon the states before he leaves office.
You deal with the federal government, you deal with other states, and you deal with the private sector. How can you divvy up the relationships? How much of your time is spent dealing with other states on issues, environmental, I would assume, and then there's private sector issues that all would come before your office, and then there are federal issues, and you're a liaison on trying to address all those.
I mean, I think in the former, as we were talking about the Clean Power Plan and the ozone challenge and the Waters of the United States challenge, there's always a number of states that are involved in that. I think there are 30 plus states that were involved in the challenge to the EPA rule involving waters in the United States. And just real quickly on that, that was an effort by the EPA to redefine what constitutes a water in the United States. The statute's very clear in the Clean Water Act that is a navigable stream or water. The EPA was expanding their jurisdiction to say that so long as a water body had a nexus to a navigable stream or water, they could exercise jurisdiction, forgive the phrase, upstream. Mm-hmm. And so we saw the EPA come in Oklahoma, as other states across the country, saying that dry creek beds, that were dry 90% of the year, when we had heavy rains, 10% of the year there was standing water in those dry creek beds, they were trying to exercise jurisdiction over those dry creek beds. That affects economic development, the building of subdivisions, farming and ranching, oil and gas. It was a rule that was far overreaching, and the courts have given us an injunction in that regard. So that's an example, Mayor, of where states are working together. We led one part of that litigation. I think Texas and West Virginia were part of another, and maybe North Dakota. So we had a collection of 3 different states and bodies of plaintiffs that were engaged in that litigation.
Scott, I know you've been active in the National Association of Attorneys General organization. Tell us about that and what that organization does and what you've been involved with.
Yeah, the National Association is what it sounds like. It's a culmination of the 50 attorneys general across the country, and I did chair the Midwest region on behalf of Oklahoma and as part of the NAG, or National Association of Attorneys General. And we get together multiple times through the year, and we talk through issues, consumer protection, law enforcement, public safety, and various aspects of our office, and how we can share information. The tobacco litigation, as you know, yielded a very substantial result to the 50 states. And so a big part of the meetings that we have is managing the ongoing tobacco settlement. And you might think that that's not terribly controversial. It is, because those manufacturers that settled with the states way back when in the 90s, there's ongoing litigation that comes out of that master settlement. In fact, we were subject to an arbitration proceeding, as were the 49 other states in Chicago over the last 2 or 3 years, and the entire tobacco line item in Oklahoma, the 85 or so million that we get each year, was under threat. So we successfully defended that and preserved that line item and that revenue coming into Oklahoma. But those are the kind of issues that we talk about.
One other thing I wanted to bring up, not the only thing, but one additional thing I'd like to ask you to comment on. You did mention consumer protection, and I have had personal contact with a number of your attorneys that do a wonderful job in the consumer protection area. Can you tell our viewers what involvement in consumer protection your office has?
Well, it's a number of things, Kent, but I mean, it ranges from situations like when we have a tornadic activity, and like the situations that have happened in Moore recently over the last couple of years. We have scammers and travelers that come into the state that seek to take advantage of Oklahomans at their most vulnerable time. We had 20 agents, actually 15 to 20 agents on the ground within 24 hours in that area, educating people about the type of scamming approaches that would be taken. And what's amazing to me is that you have these individuals that look at situations like that, whether it's hurricanes in New Orleans or on the coast, or tornadic activity here in Oklahoma. They truly see that as an opportunity, and they descend upon your state in a very, very quick fashion, and they put together a very, I think, strategic approach to defraud people of their money. We had individuals that at that time, as you know, housing was a big need. We had some individuals, scammers, that went to the multiple listing service, the real estate listing service here in Oklahoma City area, and captured data from the MLS about homes that were for sale, took that data, put it on Craigslist as though they were for rent, square footage, number of rooms, and then took deposits by electronic transfer. And we had individuals being defrauded of tens of thousands of dollars based upon the need for housing in that situation. So our office is involved in trying to raise awareness to prevent that kind of scam or fraud from happening. But if it does happen, we go after those individuals and prosecute them. It could be in the home repair context, the construction context. And so we have any number of applications of consumer protection, but it's a very broad power that we have.
How often do you deal with the federal government and the EPA on energy issues?
More often than we really want to. I mean, I think it's something. When you look at this EPA, Mayor, I'm not one of those that say that there's no role for the EPA. The EPA has served a very valuable role. I think anyone that comes, out and says, let's abolish the EPA, that's pure populism. I mean, there are air quality issues, there are water quality issues that cross state line, and historically the EPA has been a partner with the states in doing that. It's different today.
Yeah.
It's been different the last 6 to 8 years. We see an EPA that is a command and control type of approach under the Clean Air Act, under the Clean Water Act. They're picking winners and losers, and they truly are. They're trying to come in and say that fossil fuels are not trying. They are. Fossil fuels are bad, renewables are good, and they're using their authority to impose their will upon the states. And we see that happening routinely here in Oklahoma. I mean, just the latest example. The utility companies, OG&E and PSO, ultimately have to pay the freight when the EPA comes in and says, reduce your emissions with respect to CO2, or reduce your emissions with respect to another hazardous air pollutant under Section 112. When they do that, those utility companies then go before the Corporation Commission and say the EPA has mandated this environmental requirement. This is what we have to expend to achieve that. And just one example, just one rule. The regional haze statute that we fought 3 or 4 years ago, that resulted in roughly $800 million of capital outlay by OG&E to comply with that rule. And so the ratepayers of Oklahoma now are facing an increase. And so the EPA here, and for no reason, the state had submitted a state implementation plan that met the requirements of the statute. It was rejected by the feds because of one thing. We kept coal generation as part of the diversity of fuels that OG&E and PSO could choose, and the EPA didn't want that. And so they used their authority, in my opinion, unlawfully to impose a federal plan upon the state, and it cost the ratepayers in the state of Oklahoma in a significant way. So the battle right now at the EPA is a significant one. Because it's not just legal, it's not just rhetorical, it is real. It's affecting us in very, very personal ways. Oklahoma is one of the best states in the country at generating electricity through wind. We've made the college playoffs as the state because we're in the top 4 in the country at the generation of electricity through wind. 15% of our electricity portfolio is related to renewables. But despite that, you still have the EPA coming into Oklahoma under this Clean Power Plan and saying, reduce your carbon footprint by over 30%. With no legal or statutory authority. And they're doing that for one reason. They want to see coal generation stop. They want to see fossil fuels impacted even more. Over 411 coal generation facilities across the country have been shut down since 2008. The president made a promise in 2008 that he would bankrupt coal. He's done that to a large degree. There are companies that have gone out of business, fairly large companies that have gone out of business. And when you shut down that many coal generation facilities across the country, you've got to start asking the question, what do you replace that portfolio with to meet the base load energy requirements that we have as a country? Because when you combine natural gas, oil, and coal, that's over 70% of our electricity generation in this country. And historically, coals represent about 40% of that. So when that coal goes away, you've got to ask, okay, now what's going to replace it? Natural gas can and does, but to think it's all renewables is legendary, and it's going to cost so much more, and it already is taking place.
Attorney General Scott Pruitt, today's guest in The Verdict. We'll be right back with more.
Energy production, preserving Oklahoma's landscapes. Both matter to all of us. That's why horizontal drilling is such an important part of preserving Oklahoma's land. Today, just one horizontal well can do the work of as many as 6 vertical wells, reducing the size of an oil and natural gas drilling site by as much as 85%. Find out more about the industry's commitment to minimizing its footprint at oerb.com/bothmatter.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of the verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, and today's guest, Attorney General Scott Pruitt. Was your office involved in the Keystone Pipeline?
We were. I mean, as you recall, when the pipeline was being debated, the president's taken 7 years to make a decision on it. And actually, when Secretary Clinton was actually still serving as Secretary of State, she conducted a notice and comment process, an AP, Administrative Procedures Act type of process, taking comment from interested parties, and states participated in that. And so we had representatives at those meetings. We filed comment in the record about the importance of Oklahoma and the pipeline overall. As you know, it's been built south of Cushing. The part that has not been constructed is north of Cushing. You know, what's interesting about that debate is that by any definition, the construction of the Keystone Pipeline is foreign commerce. I mean, by any definition under the Constitution. And who regulates foreign commerce under the Constitution? Congress, not the president. The president's actually drawn his authority from a 1968 executive order that Nixon published that says he controls the border, and he's using this national security component to try to take, and usurp the authority of Congress to approve this pipeline. And so there are some legal questions about the extent of the president's authority. Could Congress, as an example, exert their foreign commerce power in conjunction with the compacting power of the states and approve the pipeline? That's something we're actually looking at. And there are ongoing discussions with the private company to see, are they still interested in building it, and whether there are legal steps that can be taken along with Congress to address what I think was just a terrible decision. This is something all the states along the pipeline have gone through extensive environmental review. There are environmental impact statements that were submitted and negotiated. Nebraska went through an extensive process. Every state along the pipeline wants the pipeline built. It's important for the economy. It's important to manufacturing. It will grow thousands of jobs across this country. And for one reason and one reason only, in my opinion, was it's denied by the president. It was to appease the environmental left. To have this ability to go to climate talks internationally and say, look what we're doing. We're saying no to the Keystone Pipeline. Look what we're doing. We've initiated the climate action plan, thinking that somehow that's going to convince India and China to produce less carbon emissions, which I think is absolutely fanciful. But I'm getting into editorial comment now, Mayor.
You're entitled to do that. You're
Yeah.
entitled to do that.
Yeah.
Let me change the subject just a minute. You were on when you were first elected Attorney General, and you were talking about a long-term goal that you saw for your office of moving some of the representation of state agencies out of those agencies that have hired their own in-house lawyers into the Attorney General's office and bringing about an efficiency of state representation. How has that progressed, and how does that affect your staff?
Well, I think it's gone well, actually. I mean, we have added 25 new state agencies to our list of agencies that we serve. And you said something very key. Historically, the legislature has given state agencies the authority, the prerogative, the discretion to basically disregard the advice and counsel or the Attorney General's office. They can go out and hire their own counsel, and as you know, they can also hire outside counsel. Yeah. And so the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, has been involved in, historically, approving the retention of outside counsel when agencies seek to hire them, but then moreover, they have these in-house attorneys as well. And so I've been very intentional about trying to address that. We've saved the state over $5 million in saying no to state agencies, around $4 to $5 million, with respect to retention of outside attorneys. And we've added new responsibilities to our office. The civil rights enforcement has been given to us by the legislature. There was a recent case by the Supreme Court dealing with boards and commissions that said that they can engage in anti-competitive conduct. They can pick winners and losers, and we notify the governor of that. And we now have responsibility to oversee all those agencies and decisions they're taking. So we've done quite a bit in my respect, Kent, to address the use of outside attorneys and the growth of attorneys generally. And as we've done that, I think we're serving the state in a much better fashion.
Well, what's happened to your budgets over the period of time?
The budgets have been cut, actually. I mean, the
So you're
appropriate
doing
dollar.
more with less.
Yes,
as far as dollars.
and I think it's important to note. I mean, our budget, more than half of our budget, is pass-through money, which means that the legislature appropriates that's $1 to give to somebody else. And so domestic violence shelters, I can't tell the exact number off the top of my head, but we receive money from the legislature to then pass it through to domestic violence shelters. We do that in, I think, 3 different areas. Legal aid is another one. And so our entire budget is somewhere in that 13 and a half area. Over half of that is flow-through money, pass-through money. And so we're doing, I mean, think about that. Our entire office is serving, I mentioned, about 1,000 cases or so on the docket of litigation, 25 new agencies in the general counsel area, new responsibilities with civil rights, this FTC, Federal Trade Commission review. There are others. The grand jury, the defense that we've done at the Supreme Court on the execution issue, the lawsuit by Texas trying to send more water to Texas. I mean, we're doing all that in-house now. And so this federalism unit that you made reference to, I mean, that is something that we've never done as a state. They're the ones that are engaged in this litigation under WOTUS, the Waters of the United States, the Clean Power Plan. We're actually out there advancing those cases in-house and not going out and trying to hire outside counsel. And as such, I think we've got a great team of attorneys doing a wonderful job. And our budget, by the way, and I didn't answer the question, our budget's been cut about $1 million, almost $1.2 million, a little bit over $1.2 million, I think, since 2010. So we're actually receiving less money, less appropriated money with more responsibilities. We're a donor agency, if you will.
You're the chief law enforcement officer. What would be the top 2 or 3 law enforcement problems that you have to face from a criminal standpoint?
Well, I think corruption is one. I think when you see, and we've had our share of those, unfortunately. With the Rogers County situation as an example, we were involved. You had a situation where there was a problem with the DA, the sheriff, law enforcement, and it was quite intractable. You had citizens locally in Rogers County that said, we need a grand jury that's convened there in the county to deal with this issue, and they didn't get relief. And so we, as a state grand jury, came in and gave voice to their concerns, and now we've got 2 prosecutions taking place with 2 county commissioners in Rogers County. So those things are always very challenging, Kent, and they flow out of the grand jury process. But I think the criminal appeals unit that we have, I mean, we have roughly 18 to 20 attorneys in that criminal appeals unit. Every prosecution that takes place in a DA's office that is appealed, we handle on appeal. And so that's all the capital cases. That's every appeal that goes upstream. So and I can't tell you, consistently I hear from the justices on the 10th Circuit how good a job Oklahoma is doing in that unit to represent the state's interest. They talk about our advocacy quite substantially there, consistently as I'm up in Denver.
Just about a minute left. I'm sure you're getting asked about what's next for Scott Pruitt. The statewide races, the governor's race, the Senate race. What are you telling people when they ask you about your plans?
You know, I've noticed in my life as I've journeyed and I look back over you mentioned the baseball and the baseball ownership at the Oklahoma City Redhawks. I can't say at any time there that I said, at one point I'm going to own a AAA baseball team. At one point I'm going to serve as Attorney General. I think it's very difficult to be future oriented in that regard. I think you do the best job you can, which I'm seeking to do now. You prepare. And as Abraham Lincoln said, I'll plan and prepare, and perhaps my day will come. And I don't know what that is, if it's anything. I enjoyed the private sector. I very much enjoyed the ownership of the baseball team. I enjoyed that process. I enjoy what I'm doing now. So I think the opportunities will be there. I think that we'll make the decision at the appropriate time, and I think it's premature to make those kind of decisions right now. But obviously with the statewide election for governor in 2018, that's something that we're considering, I'm considering. There may be other options, but those are out there.
Scott Pruitt is the Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for coming,
Mayor.
Scott.
Thank you, Ken.
Kent and I will have a final word when we get back.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, Each child deserves all the quality, assistance, and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We are a very conservative family, and we believe in old-fashioned family values. We have a loving home there, and we love kids, and we have 5, 6 of our own. But I had no idea we were going to go into adoption, but it's been very gratifying.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're wrapping up the show with Attorney General Scott Pruitt.
Yeah, Scott was very gracious to give us his time. He's awfully busy, obviously, and he's got a lot going on. And from all I can hear and discern from the folks in the legal community, people are quite pleased with his performance as Attorney General.
You hear about people, or you talk about people that have a lot on their plate, and you wonder, how do they do it? Scott Pruitt's one of those guys. When you talk about the number of cases that that can't be taken lightly or just briefly. I mean, these are time-consuming issues that he's delving into, and he's also one of the more proactive activist attorney generals in the country. Well, and I think he's also dealing with with the federal government that's trying to encroach on Oklahoma's beliefs.
Yeah, he does a great job.
He certainly does. We have some website information for you. You can get more information about Scott and his office at ok.gov/OAG. And our website, of course, is available to you at all times. It's theverdict.tv. You can go to our website and tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a subject you'd like to hear us discuss more on The Verdict. But that's going to do it for this week's show. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. Our thanks to Scott Pruitt, and our thanks to you for joining us right here on The Verdict.